Good day, folks, and welcome back to the channel. And this is probably going to be the last time this year that I make a video in this format, as today is the last day I'll be riding this season. Unfortunately, this is my most hated time of year, and being that it is that time, it got me thinking about one of Harley's most hated bikes, the V-Rod. I also got thinking about the V-Rod while I was doing the video about Project Nova, where Harley looked to Porsche for their input on developing a new liquid-cooled engine. So I remember the first time I saw the V-Rod. It was in a motorcycle magazine in 2002. I remember thinking this was one ugly-looking bike. I actually couldn't believe that it was a Harley Davidson. It looked to me at the time like Harley was trying to make a sport bike and failing at it. And I never saw one up close until the summer of 2004. And surprisingly, it was a Hell's Angel from Quebec who was riding the bike, which at that time was pretty odd, as most members either rode Dynas or touring models. Paint looked nice though. It was red and it had death heads kind of airbrushed on the tank. And I don't remember seeing hardly anyone else on one since. So in the late 90s, the Harley Davidson Motor Company was looking for a replacement for the Evolution engine that had done so well for them. They ended up introducing the twin cam, but the company also wanted to compete with the performance of some of the sport bikes. So already having worked with Porsche in the late 70s and early 80s, they looked to once again work together to come up with something new. The project began with a water-cooled 60-degree V-twin Harley VR 1000 engine. This motor was already high revving and used fuel injection. It was detuned a little for street use, and the displacement was increased to 1,131 cc. What came about ultimately was the Revolution engine. This power plant was a liquid-cooled, double overhead cam, 4-valve per cylinder, fuel-injected, internally counterbalanced 60-degree V-twin. It was introduced in 2001 for the 2002 model year. The engine was stated to produce 115 horsepower with a red line of 9,000 RPM. Quite a bit of a departure from what the company was producing for customers at the time. For example, the twin cam at this time had a higher displacement at 1450 cc, but only put out around 70 horsepower at a little over 5,000 RPM. Now, the engine had to be put into a bike, and Harley used a hydroformed chassis with the frame having a split backbone that surrounded the engine and fuel tank. Speaking of the gas tank, it was placed under the seat. The quote-unquote fuel tank was a dummy that was used as an air box. Harley went with solid disc wheels and a wide tire in the rear. The bike also had forward controls and a 34-degree rake. This was a two-seater with a radiator in the front and dual exhaust that swept back along the right side. The bike also ended up weighing in at 673 pounds. I think the V-Rod that we all mostly remember from this time was the silver one. And as I said before, this was a strange-looking bike to me at the time. This was meant to be a muscle cruiser, a performance bike, if you will. Now, I understand the performance aspect coming from the engine, but it was strange to have a bike meant for performance that had forward controls, over a 30-degree rake, and a wide rear tire, and weighed in at close to 700 pounds. But, what do I know? I'm not an engineer. Now, the reception, at least from what I remember, was not good at all from the classic Harley riders. Probably the same as we see now towards the Sportster S. I believe it did do well overseas, but in North America, customers mostly stayed with the twin cams. Now, the V-Rod model line ran until 2017, and there were quite a few variations. The VRSCA V-Rod ran from 2002 to 2006. This was your classic 115 horsepower V-Rod that we've just been discussing. This model also came with the 100th anniversary badging in 2003. The VRS-CB V-Rod ran from 2004 to 2005. This model only had a 2-year run and was pretty much the same as the original V-Rod, except it came with a black frame, slightly different instrument housing, and a polished aluminum and black powder coated engine. The VRSCR Street Rod ran from 2006 to 2007. This was a road-inspired model. This bike had inverted forks and a higher lean angle of 40 degrees. This V-Rod also got mid-controls, a 5-gallon fuel tank, higher seat, and new style exhaust. The VRSCD Night Rod ran from 2006 to 2007. As you've probably guessed, this was a black bike. Black paint, black frame, and black and chrome engine. In 2008, the Night Rod's displacement was increased from 1131cc to 1247cc. This gave the bike a claimed 125 horsepower and 85 foot-pounds of torque. The VRSCAW V-Rod running from 2007 to 2010. This was essentially the successor of the original V-Rod. It was basically the same with a new frame. It was a heavier model than its predecessor by 37 pounds. It also received the increase in displacement to 1247 in 2008. The VRSCDX Night Rod Special, running from 2007 to 2017. This was the factory custom version of the Night Rod. This was part of Harley's Dark Custom series. This was a blacked out model with straight shot dual exhaust. This bike also got black slotted wheels with dark orange pinstriping. There was also a 10th anniversary edition of the Night Rod in 2012. This model came with chrome slash-cut mufflers, split 5-spoke cast aluminum wheels, inverted polished forks, chrome powertrain with platinum crankcase and heads. And of course, it had the 10th anniversary badging. The VRSCF V-Rod Muscle, running from 2009 to 2017. The bike had a 1247cc engine, but what made this model different was that it had dual exhaust with a crossover, one on each side of the bike. It also had an airbox mocked up with air rams, and in production models, the rams were only cosmetic, which is a big waste in my opinion. And as far as the muscle goes, it only made slightly more torque at 86 foot-pounds at a lower RPM of 6,500. The VRS CSE Screamin' Eagle V-Rod in 2005. This model was technically the same as the regular V-Rod, except it came with custom paint, more chrome, and the 1247cc engine with ported heads. The VRS CSE2 Screamin' Eagle V-Rod came out in 2006. More or less, this was the same as the last year's Screamin' Eagle V-Rod, except this model was the first to receive the 240mm rear tire. And lastly, the famed VRXSE V-Rod Destroyer from 2006. This was a non-street legal bike. This Revolution engine had a longer stroke camshaft and increased bore, high compression pistons, larger valves, larger throttle bodies, dyno-tuned velocity stacks, and high lift cams. The total displacement reached 1300 cc. This model put out 170 horsepower and 100 foot-pounds of torque, and that's to the rear tire, not measured at the crank. Harley even went as far as to put on a height-adjustable wheelie bar to keep the front wheel down at launches. This was a sub 10-second quarter-mile bike, and there were only 646 of these produced. This is definitely my favorite version of the V-Rod. So why was the V-Rod so disliked by the majority of Harley fans? I would say it was mostly because of its look. At least that was kind of the reason for me. I'm sure there were some loyalists who were also not fond of Harley using a liquid-cooled engine. Either way, I wouldn't say the original V-Rod is the most hated, but I would bet it's on most people's top 10 lists. But over the years, some people have made some nice customizations using this platform. Maybe someday the company will come out with another version. That would be wild, in my opinion, to see a V-Rod Icons model using the Sportster S platform. Anyway, I think that'll be it for today. And are there any V-Rod fans out there? Let's hear you guys in the comments. And until next time, we'll see you later.